Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the shadowy depths of medieval France, where empires crumble like forgotten dreams and kings rise from the mud like ghosts unwilling to stay buried. Imagine this in 476 CE. The last Roman emperor is deposed not by a grand catastrophe, but by a barbarian chieftain who simply walks in and takes the throne. Did you know that Odoacer didn't even kill the boy emperor? Just sent him off to a villa like a bad employee getting early retirement. What if the greatest empire in history ended not with a bang, but with a whisper of fading glory, leaving millions scrambling in the dark? And here's the creepy part as you stand there in the ruins, clutching those worn Roman coins that once brought bread and loyalty. You wonder if your own world could vanish just as quietly, swallowed by the winds of change. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine reaches. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shiver in the biting chill of a late autumn wind whipping through the empty forums of what was once Roman Gaul. Your fingers numb as they clutch those fading silver coins stamped with the stern face of an emperor, whose name you can barely recall. The metal cold and slick against your palm like a promise broken long ago. The air carries the acrid tang of abandoned hearths, smoke from dying fires mingling with the earthy rot of untended fields, and you feel the uncertainty gnawing at your bones, a deep, insistent ache that spreads from your toes upward, as if the ground itself is pulling you down into the void left by the empire's collapse. You step carefully over cracked marble tiles, once polished to mirror the glory of Rome, now overgrown with weeds that snag at your coarse wool tunic, the fabric damp and heavy from the mist rolling in from the Rhine, clinging to your skin like an unwanted embrace that whispers of forgotten legions marching away forever. Historians still argue whether this fall was a sudden apocalypse or a slow decay, like a grand old house rotting from the inside while the facade stands proud. But as you wander these desolate streets, you know it feels like both a thunderclap of silence, where the roar of crowds used to echo, now replaced by the distant howls of wolves claiming the wilds beyond the crumbling walls. You pause at the edge of a forsaken aqueduct, its arches looming like skeletal fingers against the grey sky, and run your hand along the rough stone, feeling the grooves worn by centuries of water that no longer flows. A tidbit of absurdity hitting you. These Romans built wonders that outlasted their empire. Yet here you are, thirsty in the rain, wondering if their engineers ever imagined barbarians using the ruins as barns for their cattle. The wind picks up, carrying the faint metallic taste of iron on your teeth from biting down on fear, and you zoom out for a moment, seeing the vast landscape of Gaul stretching like a tattered map under storm clouds. Rivers swollen with the tears of a dying age, forests dense and dark where Celtic spirits might still lurk, waiting to reclaim what Rome stole. You huddle against a fallen column, the cold seeping through your thin sandals into your feet, a sensory struggle that makes every step a small agony, as if the land itself resents your presence, punishing you for the hubris of those who came before. Ironically, it's worse than scrolling through endless social media feeds today, where empires of likes and shares crumble with one algorithm tweak, leaving you scrolling in the dark for meaning that never comes. You hear footsteps approaching, not the disciplined tramp of Roman legions, but the ragged shuffle of Germanic tribesmen, their fur cloaks reeking of animal fat and wood smoke, eyes gleaming with the hunger of conquerors who see opportunity in the ashes. One of them, a tall Frank with a scarred face, gestures at you with a spear tip glinting dully in the fading light, and you feel a shocking pang of empathy for the locals caught in this transition. Families huddled in their thatched huts, whispering prayers to gods both old and new, sad that their world of ordered roads and baths is giving way to chaos where strength alone dictates survival. You back away slowly, the uncertainty twisting in your gut like a knife, sarcasm bubbling up as you think how modern folks complain about power outages. Try living through the blackout of an entire civilization, where the lights of knowledge flicker out one by one. As you slip into the shadows of a ruined villa, vines creeping over mosaic floors that once depicted triumphant gods, you catch the scent of wet wool intensifying, your tunic now sodden from a sudden drizzle that patters like accusatory fingers on the stone. The barbarian winds howl louder, rattling loose tiles and stirring leaves that whirl like lost souls, and you wonder if this void will ever be filled, or if you'll wander forever in the bite of this endless night. You press on through the gathering dusk, the forums behind you echoing with ghostly memories of orators and merchants, now silent witnesses to the injustice of history's wheel turning without mercy, where the mighty fall and the forgotten rise, their breaths mingling in the cold air like conspirators plotting the next era. A distant thunder rumbles, shaking the ground beneath your aching feet, and you taste the iron sharper now, as if blood from unseen wounds is seeping into the earth, feeding the roots of what will become medieval France. Historians debate if this collapse sparked innovation, or merely survival, like rebooting a crashed computer only to find half the files corrupted. But as you crouch in the lee of a toppled statue, its marble eyes staring blankly at the stars emerging overhead, you feel the profound sadness of lost knowledge, scrolls burning in forgotten libraries, recipes for concrete and medicine vanishing into the mist. You imagine the absurdity of Roman elites fleeing with their togas hitched up, clutching gold that buys nothing in a world where a good sword matters more than a senator's seal, much like today's billionaires prepping bunkers for doomsday, only to find money can't buy loyalty when the end comes. The wind shifts, bringing a whiff of distant campfires where Frankish warriors gather, their laughter rough and foreign, and you feel a chill run down your spine. Not just from the cold, but from the realization that you're standing at the threshold of a 1,000-year transformation, where barbarians will become kings and ruins will birth cathedrals. You move toward the flickering lights, drawn by the promise of warmth despite the danger, your bones protesting with every step, the uncertainty gnawing deeper as the night fully claims the land. Zooming out again, the landscape unfolds like a vast, breathing entity, rivers carving new paths through the decay, forests reclaiming cities that once defied nature, a poetic reminder that empires are but temporary scars on the earth's eternal skin. You quicken your pace, the damp wool chafing against your skin, an ironic comfort in its misery, like wearing wet socks on a long hike because it's all you have. The forums fade behind you, their empty arches silhouetted against the moon, whispering of glories past, but ahead lies the unknown, where faith and fury will forge a new world from the fragments. You taste the iron once more, sharper with anticipation, as shadows lengthen and the bite of uncertainty evolves into something almost alive, pulsing in your veins like a prelude to rebirth. What if this darkness isn't an end, but the womb of something greater, more terrifying in its beauty? The question hangs in the air, heavy as the mist, as you step into the encroaching wilds. Feeling the first pricks of rain like needles of fate, you kneel before the flickering flames of a makeshift altar in the dim Cathedral of Reims, the cold stone floor biting into your knees like unforgiving teeth, sending sharp pains shooting up your legs as the chill seeps through your thin garments. A sensory struggle that makes every breath feel laboured and deliberate. The air is thick with the pungent incense of burning herbs mixed with the metallic tang of blood from the nearby rivers where battles raged just days ago. The water still stained red from Clovis's conquests, and you taste it on your tongue, sharp and coppery like biting down on a rusted nail, reminding you of the violence that birthed this moment. Historians still debate whether Clovis's conversion in 496 was a genuine spiritual awakening or a cunning political maneuver to unite his fractured tribes under one banner, much like a modern politician flipping parties for votes. But as you bow your head, feeling the prickle of forced faith crawling across your skin like invisible insects, you sense the irony in how a barbarian king's whisper to a bishop could reshape an entire continent. The bishop's hands tremble slightly as he pours the holy water over Clovis's bowed head, the liquid splashing cold and startling against the warrior's scarred forehead, and you watch from the shadows, your own wet wool cloak now mutated from the damp mist outside into a sodden weight heavy with river spray clinging to your shoulders, chafing raw spots that burn with quiet agony. Clovis stands, his sword humming faintly in its scabbard as if vibrating with divine fury, the blade etched with runes from his pagan past now blessed by Christian oil, an absurd tidbit hitting you. Did you know Frankish kings once used pig bladders inflated as makeshift floats during river crossings in battle? A bizarre ingenuity that saved lives amid the carnage. You step closer, drawn by the crowd's murmurs, feeling the heat from the torches, their light dancing erratically on the walls like restless spirits casting long shadows that mutate the faces around you into grotesque masks of awe and fear. A physical event unfolds as Clovis turns to his warriors, his voice booming with newfound zeal, declaring the old gods dead and the Christian one his ally. And you flinch as one skeptical tribesman is dragged forward, his eyes wide with the shocking sadness of betrayal, forced to kneel or face the sword, a lightly dramatized moment where empathy wells up for those caught in the crossfire of ambition and belief. You taste the iron stronger now, evolving from the blood river tang into something almost sacred, like communion wine laced with rust. And sarcasm creeps in as you think how this fiery baptism is less holy fire and more political theatre. Worse than those viral TED Talks where speakers sell enlightenment but deliver sales pitches, zooming out poetically. The cathedral expands in your mind like a vast breathing organism, its arches curving like ribs over the huddled masses, the rivers outside flowing eternally, carrying away the sins of empires while birthing new ones in their muddy depths. Your skin prickles anew, not just from the chill but from the injustice of it all, where a queen like Clotilde Clovis's wife, whispering Christian verses in his ear during long nights, twists the fate of nations with quiet words. Her influence a surprising revisit to the shadows of fallen Rome from the previous void, where women like her turned warriors into kings through faith rather than force. You move among the converts, their breaths fogging the air in rhythmic clouds, feeling the damp wool mutate further into a clammy second skin that itches with the filth of unwashed days on the march. A struggle that mirrors the internal conflict of those abandoning ancestral gods for this new, demanding deity. The bishop chants in Latin, words you barely understand rolling like thunder, and you catch a glimpse of Clovis's eyes, fierce, calculating, betraying the debate within, perhaps regretting the old freedoms of Germanic forests where oaths were sworn on thunder gods, not crucified saviors. A clever commentary slips through your thoughts. It's ironic how this baptism, meant to wash away sins, only drowns the old ways in a flood of strategic piety, much like how today's influencers rebrand themselves overnight for better sponsorships, leaving followers bewildered and betrayed. You reach out to touch the altar's edge, the wood rough and splintered under your fingers, sending a small jolt of pain that grounds you in the moment, as the crowd erupts in uneasy cheers, their voices echoing off the stone like trapped echoes of doubt. The torches flare brighter, their light now mutating into a warmer glow that battles the encroaching night outside. But the chill of forced faith lingers, wrapping around your heart like invisible chains, sad in its profundity because for every soul saved, another fractures under the weight of imposed belief. You watch Clovis sheath his sword, the hum fading to a whisper, and wonder if this alliance with the church will build lasting kingdoms or sow seeds of future schisms, the air growing heavier with unspoken questions. Zooming out once more, the scene widens to encompass the blood-soaked rivers winding through Gaul, their waters reflecting torchlight like veins of fire in the dark, a poetic tapestry where personal conversions ripple into historical tsunamis, altering the flow of centuries. Your knees ache from the prolonged kneel, a persistent throb that blends with a prickle on your skin, evolving into a full-body unease as the ceremony concludes. Warriors filing out into the night with mixed expressions of triumph and loss. The bishop's final blessing hangs in the air like smoke, and you rise unsteadily, the wet wool shifting uncomfortably, chafing anew as you follow the procession, tasting the iron evolve into a bitter aftertaste of inevitability. Sarcasm bubbles up lightly. Who knew salvation came with such a hefty price tag? Like signing up for a gym membership only to realize the workouts never end. The doors creak open to the outside world, where stars pierce the sky like judgmental eyes, and you step into the cool breeze, feeling the divine fury subside but the chill deepen. Wondering what twisted paths this forced faith will carve through the ages, a strange visual image lingers Clovis's sword, now silent, resting against the altar like a serpent coiled in wait, its blade catching the last flicker of torchlight before the shadows claim it completely. Did you know that Merovingian kings wore their hair long as a sacred symbol of royal power, believing it held magical strength? But in reality, it often became a greasy, tangled mess that enemies could grab in battle like a convenient handle. You choke on the thick, smoky stench of roasted game filling the shadowy halls of a Merovingian villa. The air heavy with the greasy haze from spits turning over open fires, fat dripping and hissing into the flames, making your eyes water and your throat constrict in a persistent, burning irritation that feels like swallowing embers whole. The wet wool of your cloak, now mutated from the river dampness of Clovis's baptism into a steaming shroud baked by the hall's heat, clings to your back like a living thing, chafing your skin raw and sending waves of ache radiating up your spine, as if the weight of fractured thrones presses directly on your shoulders, bending you under the invisible burden of a dynasty already cracking at its seams. You sit at a long oaken table scarred from countless feasts, your fingers greasy from tearing into a haunch of venison, the meat tough and gamey on your tongue, mingling with the recurring taste of iron evolving now from the blood river tang into the rusty bite of overused knives passed hand to hand among warriors whose loyalties shift like the flickering torchlight dancing on the walls. A physical event erupts as King Childebert, one of Clovis's sons, slams his fist on the table, spilling mead that soaks into the rushes underfoot, sticky and sour smelling, while he accuses his brother Clotaire of plotting to seize more territory. Their voices rising in a cacophony that echoes off the stone like trapped thunder. Brotherly betrayals unfolding before your eyes in heated glares and drawn daggers half unsheathed. Historians still argue whether the Merovingian custom of dividing the kingdom among all sons was a wise Germanic tradition of equality or a recipe for endless civil war, like setting up a family business where every sibling gets a share but no one agrees on the CEO. But as you witness the tension, feeling the ache in your back intensify from hunching over in anticipation of violence, you sense the shocking sadness of a family tree poisoned at its roots, where love curdles into suspicion over parcels of land. You glance at the long-haired kings lounged on their thrones, their tresses oiled and braided but reeking of unwashed days on horseback. An absurd tidbit whispering in your mind, did you know they sometimes used fermented mare's milk as a hair tonic? Believing it granted invincibility, a bizarre ritual that left them smelling like sour cheese amid the opulence. The torchlight mutates here into erratic shadows that play across their faces, turning expressions of mirth into masks of menace. And you zoom out poetically, the hall expanding like a cavernous maw swallowing the night outside, rivers of mead flowing like the bloodlines that will soon run red with fratricide, the vast Frankish lands stretching beyond as a patchwork quilt torn by greedy hands. Your sensory struggle deepens as the smoke coils into your lungs, a choking haze that blurs your vision and makes every breath a laboured gasp, mirroring the injustice of peasants toiling in fields to fill these tables while kings squabble over spoils, their backs unbroken by labour but bowed by paranoia. Sarcasm creeps in lightly as you think how this feasting is less royal banquet and more dysfunctional family dinner, worse than those awkward holiday gatherings where uncles argue politics over turkey. But here the stakes are kingdoms instead of just bruised egos. You rise to refill your horn, brushing past a retainer whose eyes dart suspiciously. Revisiting Clovis with a surprising twist, the founder whose baptism promised unity now haunts these halls as a spectral ideal. His divine right twisted into excuses for sons to carve up his legacy, like the venison before them. His sword, once humming with fury, now a relic gathering dust in the corner, symbol of a unity that died with him. The air grows thicker, the smoky stench evolving into a cloying fog that settles in your chest like regret, and you feel a profound empathy for the women weaving tapestries in the corners, their fingers calloused from needles, whispering of poisons and alliances to protect their children in this web of intrigue. A clever commentary surfaces. It's ironic how these long-haired lords claim descent from sea gods and heroes, yet they bicker like children over toys, their magical locks no shield against the filth of ambition that stains everything it touches. You lean against a pillar, the cool stone a brief respite from the heat, but your back protests with a sharp twinge, as if echoing the fractured thrones splintering under the weight of too many claimants. The feast continues in fits and starts, laughter punctured by accusations, and you taste the iron sharper, now laced with the bitterness of spilled wine, a flavour that lingers like the debates over whether this era built Europe's foundations or merely sowed the seeds of its endless wars. Zooming out once more, The villa nestles in a landscape of rolling hills dotted with Roman ruins repurposed as barns. The night sky above a velvet canopy pierced by stars like watchful eyes judging the chaos below. A lyrical shift where human follies seem small against the eternal turn of seasons. Your cloak steams faintly in the fire's glow, the wet wool's discomfort mutating into a sweaty itch that crawls across your shoulders. A constant reminder of the hardship in this so-called golden age, where glory comes wrapped in grime. The kings retire to their chambers, guards posted with wary glances, and you slip away into the cooler corridors, the ache in your back a dull throb that promises more pain ahead, sad in its inevitability because for every toast raised tonight, a betrayal brews in the shadows. A strange visual image persists, the long hairs of the kings trailing like serpents across the floor, coiling in the rushes as if alive, ready to strike at the first sign of weakness. Did you know that in 732 a single battle at Tours halted an Islamic advance that had swept through Spain like wildfire? But historians still whispered debates over whether it was truly the hammer blow that saved Christian Europe, or just a skirmish exaggerated by later chroniclers. Much like how one viral tweet can spark a cultural shift today, while the real changes brew unseen. You feel the scorching sun blister your skin as you trudge across the dusty crossroads near Poitiers, the heat rising in waves from the parched earth like breath from a furnace, baking your exposed arms into raw, throbbing patches that peel and sting with every movement. A sensory struggle that turns the simple act of marching into an endless torment where sweat mixes with grime to form a gritty paste clinging to your body. The air shimmers with the haze of midday glare, carrying the acrid tang of horse sweat and unwashed men, and you taste the iron on your teeth mutated now from the rusty bite of feast knives into the dry, metallic dust kicked up by thousands of hooves pounding the ground, sharp and unrelenting like chewing on sun-baked nails forged in the fires of desperation. Your wet wool tunic, evolved from the steaming feast shroud into a sun-soaked rag heavy with perspiration, chafes against your blistered shoulders, the fabric stiff and abrasive, pulling at hairs and skin alike in a constant, itching agony that makes you long for the cool shadows of those Merovingian halls you left behind. A physical event surges as Charles Martel, the mayor of the palace whose name echoes like a war drum, signals the charge from his vantage on a low hill, his armoured riders thundering forward in a cloud of dust that chokes the air, lances lowered and shields raised against the Umayyad cavalry sweeping in from the south, their curved swords flashing in the relentless light like serpents striking from the haze. You grip your spear tighter, the wood splintered and sweat slick in your palms, feeling the ground tremble underfoot as the two forces collide in a cacophony of clashing metal and screams, the impact sending shockwaves through your bones like hammers on an anvil. Revisiting Clovis with a surprising twist, the founder, whose baptism forged alliances now manifests in Martel's strategy, blending Christian zeal with barbarian ferocity. But here it's not faith alone that wins, it's the gritty pragmatism of foot soldiers like you, holding the line against invaders who outnumber and outmaneuver, their exotic banners fluttering like mocking phantoms. Historians debate if Martel's victory was divine intervention or sheer luck, like flipping a coin in a storm and calling heads while the winds howl. But as you thrust your weapon into the fray, dodging a swinging blade that whistles past your ear, you sense the shocking sadness of fallen comrades crumpling into the dirt, their blood soaking the crossroads into mud, a lightly dramatized tableau where empathy surges for the Muslim scouts far from home, driven by their own king's ambitions, dying in this alien heat just as senselessly. An absurd tidbit crosses your mind amid the chaos. Did you know Frankish warriors sometimes use leech prescriptions before battle, believing the bloodletting sharpened their senses, a bizarre remedy that left them weakened and woozy, much like chugging energy drinks before a marathon only to crash halfway. The sun beats down mercilessly, blistering your skin further into fiery welts that pulse with every heartbeat, and sarcasm bubbles up as you parry a blow, thinking how this hammering back feels less heroic and more like being the nail in a divine carpenter's workshop, worse than grinding through a 9-to-5 shift under fluorescent lights that buzz like angry bees. You zoom out poetically, the battlefield expanding like a vast heaving canvas painted in reds and browns, rivers of men flowing and clashing like tributaries meeting in flood, the distant hills watching impassively as history pivots on this dusty pivot. a lyrical shift where individual pains dissolve into the grand sweep of civilizations grinding against each other like tectonic plates. The filth of endless marches clings to you, boots caked in mud from weeks of pursuit, the grime working into every crease and pore, evolving the wet wool's discomfort into a full-body crust that cracks and itches with movement. A constant reminder of the injustice where peasants like you bear the brunt while palace mayors claim the glory. A clever commentary whispers through the din. It's ironic how Martel, an illegitimate son rising through ranks, hammers order from chaos. Much like a startup founder disrupting old markets with nothing but grit and a good pitch, leaving the established kings as figureheads in their long-haired irrelevance. You stumble over a fallen horse, its flanks heaving in final gasps, the stench of its bowels releasing in death, adding to the overwhelming miasma, and feel a profound empathy for the invaders' mounts, exhausted beasts driven across mountains only to die here, sad in their mute suffering amid human folly. The charge echoes on, Martel's voice cutting through the roar like a clarion, urging you forward despite the blisters bursting under your sandals, sending fresh stings up your legs. Zooming out once more, the crossroads blur into a mosaic of struggle, dust clouds rising like veils over the dead and dying, the sun a pitiless eye bearing witness to the turning point where Europe hangs in balance, a poetic tapestry woven from threads of blood and ambition. Your spear arm aches from repeated thrusts, the iron taste intensifying with exertion, now laced with the salt of sweat dripping into your mouth, sarcasm lingering as you realize survival here is as much about dodging dysentery from filthy camps as enemy blades. The battle rages, filth grinding deeper into your wounds, and you wonder if this hammering will forge lasting peace, or just more echoes of pain to come. A psychological chill settles as the sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch like accusing fingers across the carnage, pointing toward uncertain tomorrows. You shiver under the slick touch of Pepin's anointed oils trickling down your forehead in the snowy chapels of Saint-Denis, the viscous liquid cold as melted ice against your skin, carrying the exotic scent of myrrh and frankincense that fills your nostrils like a heavy fog, thick with papal whispers and the rising ambitions of men who dream of empires reborn from the frost. The air hangs dense and incense-laden, swirling in eddies around the stone altar where Pepin stands, his broad shoulders draped in a fur-lined cloak that reeks of the winter hunts. And you inhale deeply, the fumes burning your throat in a slow, creeping irritation that evolves the familiar taste of iron on your teeth, mutated now from the dusty bite of battlefields into a sanctified sharpness, like licking a chalice forged in holy fire but laced with the rust of earthly power grabs. Your wet wool garments, transformed from the sun-soaked rags of Tours into snow-dusted layers crusted with frost, cling to your limbs like frozen chains, the chill seeping deep into your muscles and causing them to ache with a persistent throb, as if the weight of this coronation presses not just on Pepin's head, but on every soul present, bending spines under the injustice of a world where bastards like Charles Martel could hammer victories only for their sons to claim crowns through cunning deals. A physical event unfolds as Pope Stephen II, his robes whispering against the flagstones, places the crown upon Pepin's head with trembling hands, the metal clinking softly like distant bells tolling for the end of Merovingian puppets, and you watch from the pews, feeling the crowd surge forward in hushed awe, their breaths fogging the frigid air as chants rise in Latin waves, a ceremony that seals the Carolingian rise but stirs whispers of betrayal among the long-haired loyalists lurking in the shadows. Historians still argue whether this 751 anointing was a genuine papal endorsement of divine right or a pragmatic alliance to counter Lombard threats, like two CEOs merging companies to fend off a hostile takeover. But as you kneel in the pew, your knees grinding against the icy stone in a sensory struggle that sends numb pins through your legs, you sense the shocking sadness of the deposed Childeric through, shaved bald and banished to a monastery, his magical locks once symbols of invincibility clipped away in a humiliating twist, a lightly dramatized fall from grace that evokes empathy for the figurehead kings, reduced to monastic silence, while upstarts like Pepin parade in stolen glory. An absurd tidbit flickers in your mind amid the solemnity. Did you know early Frankish coronations sometimes involved anointing with oil mixed from crushed relics? a bizarre concoction believed to impart saintly power, much like blending protein shakes with celebrity-endorsed vitamins today for that extra edge. The torchlight here mutates into candle flames guttering in the drafty chapel, their warm glow battling the encroaching snowflakes drifting through cracked windows, casting elongated shadows that dance like conspirators plotting the next dynasty's fate. And sarcasm creeps in as you think how this new dawn feels less like enlightenment and more like a power outage fixed with duct tape. Worse than rebooting your router during a storm only to find the connection still spotty. You zoom out poetically, the chapel expanding like a crystalline bubble in the winter landscape, snow blanketing the fields outside like a white shroud over buried Roman roads, the Rhine freezing into glassy veins that carry whispers of past conquests downstream, a lyrical shift where human ceremonies seem fragile against nature's indifferent blanket. Your fingers numb from the cold. You clutch the wooden bench, the splintered grain digging into your palms like tiny accusations. Revisiting Charles Martel with a surprising twist, the hammer who saved Europe at Tours now echoes in his son's coronation. But where Martel wielded brute force, Pepin brandishes papal ink, turning battlefield hammers into quills that rewrite history with holy sanction, his ambitions rising like the incense smoke coiling toward the vaulted ceiling. The oils on your skin begin to dry, cracking in the chill like fragile promises, evolving the wet wool's discomfort into a brittle stiffness that cracks with every shift, a constant itch against the backdrop of rising hymns. A clever commentary surfaces. It's ironic how this snowy chapel, meant for spiritual purity, hosts a political theatre where whispers of alliance drown out prayers, much like boardroom deals disguised as team-building retreats, leaving the little people you included shivering in the fallout. You feel a profound empathy for the monks chanting in the choir, their voices strained from the cold, sad in their devotion to a faith manipulated by kings who see God as just another vassal to swear fealty. The ceremony peaks as Pepin raises his arms, the crown gleaming dully in the candlelight, and you taste the iron intensify, now infused with the bitter edge of incense residue coating your tongue. Sarcasm lingering as you realize divine right is just old wine in new bottles, repackaged for the ambitious. Zooming out once more, the scene widens to encompass the snow-swept abbey grounds like a vast, silent orchestra pit, where history conducts its symphony, winds howling through bare trees like unseen choruses, a poetic tapestry threaded with the ambitions that will thaw into springs of war and reform. Your limbs protest the prolonged kneel, the ache deepening into a dull fire, and you wonder if this anointed warmth will spread or freeze solid in the coming storms. A strange visual image lingers, the oils pooling at Pepin's feet, like golden tears wept by the crown itself, reflecting the flickering candles before being absorbed into the stone, vanishing without trace. You trudge through the mud-slicked paths of the Saxon forests, your boots sinking deep into the sucking mire with every laborious step, the ooze pulling at your heels like greedy hands from the underworld, sending jolts of exhaustion up your legs that burn in your calves and thighs, a sensory struggle where the cold slime seeps through cracks in your leather soles, chilling your toes to numb stubs that throb with persistent agony, as if frostbite whispers promises of lost limbs. The air hangs heavy with the acrid smoke of pagan fires smouldering in distant clearings, the bitter haze stinging your eyes and coating your throat in a gritty film, and you cough harshly, tasting the iron on your teeth mutated now from the sanctified sharpness of Pepin's oils into a sooty, charred bite like gnawing on embers from sacrificial altars, sharp and unrelenting amid the damp rot of decaying leaves underfoot. Your wet wool cloak, evolved from the snow-crusted layers of the chapel into a sodden, mud-caked burden heavy with forest dew and splatter, clings to your back like a parasitic skin, chafing raw welts that weep and sting with every swing of your arms, the fabric's weight dragging you down as Charlemagne's armies surge around you. In 772 their iron will forging ahead through endless thickets, where thorns snag and tear like vengeful spirits. A physical event erupts as the Emperor himself, mounted on a massive warhorse whose flanks steam in the chill, points his sword toward a hidden Saxon village, bellowing orders that echo through the trees like thunder, and the troops charge, axes hacking at underbrush while flames leap from torches flung into thatched roofs. The crackle and roar swallowing screams as pagan idols topple in bursts of sparks. a lightly dramatized chaos where empathy surges for the Saxon families fleeing into the shadows, their world of ancient oaks and thunder gods crumbling under Frankish boots, sad in the shocking injustice of conversion by conquest. Historians still debate whether Charlemagne's 30-year Saxon wars were holy missions to spread Christianity or brutal land grabs masked as piety, like colonizers claiming manifest destiny while eyeing resources. But as you swing your axe at a stubborn root blocking the path, your lungs burning from the smoke that billows thicker now, twisting into black coils that obscure the sky, you feel the profound weight of it all, sarcasm creeping in as you think how this iron will feels less like divine mandate and more like stubborn gym sessions where you push through pain for gains that never quite arrive. Worse than grinding a video game level that resets every time you die, an absurd tidbit flickers amid the haze. Did you know Saxon warriors sometimes wore helmets adorned with boar tusks, believing they channeled the beast's ferocity, a bizarre adornment that often snagged on branches during forest skirmishes, turning fierce symbols into comical hazards. The torchlight mutates here into the erratic glow of burning villages, flames leaping like demonic dancers across the canopy, casting grotesque shadows that elongate your comrades' forms into monstrous silhouettes, and sarcasm bubbles up lightly as you parry a desperate Saxon spear. Realizing evangelization by fire is about as subtle as those door-to-door salesmen who won't take no for an answer, leaving you breathless and battered in the name of salvation. You zoom out poetically, the forest expanding like a vast, breathing labyrinth where trees stand as ancient sentinels witnessing the clash of worlds, rivers of smoke winding through branches like veins of fury, the distant Alps looming as indifferent judges to humanity's endless cycles of domination, a lyrical shift where individual struggles dissolve into the grand mosaic of empire building. Your sensory struggle intensifies as mud cakes your face in a gritty mask, the acrid smoke evolving into a choking veil that sears your nostrils and blurs your vision, making every breath a laboured rasp that echoes the injustice of peasants like you, conscripted from farms to fight for a king's glory while your own fields lie fallow back home. A clever commentary surfaces. It's ironic how Charlemagne, revisiting Pepin with a surprising twist, the son elevating his father's papal pact into continental conquest, turns whispers of alliance into roars of subjugation, his iron will hammering not just enemies but the very soul of Europe into submission, much like tech giants acquiring startups to crush competition under the guise of innovation. You stumble over a root, the jolt sending fresh pain through your blistered feet, feeling a shocking pang of sadness for the pagan priests dragged from their groves, their runes carved into sacred trees now fuel for Christian bonfires, their cries lost in the crackling inferno. The armies surge onward, Charlemagne's banner fluttering high like a promise of unity forged in blood, and you taste the iron sharper, now infused with the ashy residue of defeat. Sarcasm lingering as you realize glory in these woods is just another word for survival amid the muck. Zooming out once more, the scene widens to encompass the endless forests like a green ocean roiled by storms of men, pagan fires dotting the horizon like defiant stars soon to be extinguished. A poetic tapestry where the clash of faiths weaves patterns that will endure beyond the smoke's dissipation. Your lungs burn fiercer, the smoke clawing deeper, and you wonder if this conquering will birth lasting peace or merely kindle resentments that smoulder for generations. A psychological chill descends as the flames die down, leaving embers glowing like accusatory eyes in the gathering dusk, watching your weary retreat. You sense the cold draft of fragmentation seeping through the cracks in the candlelit chambers of Arkan's palace, whispering like a treacherous advisor as it snakes around your ankles, numbing your toes in their worn boots and sending shivers racing up your spine, a chill that bites deeper than the winter winds outside where snow piles against the stone walls like unspoken grievances. Did you know that Charlemagne's empire, spanning from the Atlantic to the Elbe, was divided not by enemy swords, but by the ancient Frankish custom of partible inheritance, where every son got a slice of the pie, leading to a realm fractured into pieces that historians estimate caused over a dozen civil wars in the following generations alone? What if sharing fairly among brothers was the deadliest tradition of all, turning family bonds into battle lines sharper than any blade? The air in the chamber hangs heavy with the scent of melting beeswax from dozens of candles flickering in iron holders, their flames casting wavering shadows that mutate the faces of Charlemagne's sons, Louis, Pepin, and Charles, into grotesque masks of ambition and resentment, and you taste the iron on your teeth, evolved now from the charred bite of Saxon fires into a waxy, bitter tang like chewing on sealed parchments inked with divisive decrees, sharp and unyielding amid the musty odour of old tapestries woven with scenes of past conquests. Your fingers go numb from clutching maps stained with familial strife, the vellum crackling under your grip as you trace the borders redrawn in hasty charcoal lines. The ink spots like bloodstains from quarrels that spill over the table, and your wet wool cloak mutated from the mud-caked burden of forest marches into a stiff, wax-spattered shroud from hours bent over these documents drapes heavily over your shoulders, chafing against neck welts that throb with a dull fire, the fabric's weight pulling you down as if the Empire's divisions press physically upon you, making every breath a laboured sigh in this stuffy room where the injustice of inheritance laws favours quantity over quality, dooming realms to endless splintering. A physical event erupts as Louis the Pious, the surviving heir after his brother's untimely deaths, slams the map down in frustration, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling like a crack of thunder, accusing phantom rivals of plotting against his unity while his own sons Lothair, Pepin, and Louis the German lean in with hungry eyes, their whispers rising like steam from heated wine goblets, the argument escalating into shouts that rattle the candle flames, sending wax droplets flying like accusatory tears onto the stained parchments. Historians still debate whether this 843 Treaty of Verdun was a pragmatic peace, or the fatal fracture that birthed modern nations from imperial ruins, like slicing a pizza unevenly at a family gathering, only to watch everyone fight over the biggest piece. But as you steady the quill in your frozen fingers, feeling the ink freeze mid-stroke in the drafty air, you sense the shocking sadness of a father's legacy crumbling before his eyes. Charlemagne's grand vision revisited with a surprising twist, as the emperor who conquered endless forests now haunts these chambers through his absent will. His iron will bent into fragile partitions that invite invasion and chaos, sad in the lightly dramatized tragedy of brothers turning siblings into strangers over lines on a map. An absurd tidbit crosses your mind amid the tension. Did you know Frankish nobles sometimes used hollowed-out animal horns as inkwells during such councils, believing the beast spirit guided their decisions, a bizarre custom that often led to spills and smudges symbolizing the messiness of their politics. The candlelight mutates here into elongated flickers that stretch across the walls like grasping fingers, illuminating the map's jagged borders that carve the realm into Francia Occidentalis, Media, and Orientalis, shadows playing tricks that make the division seem alive, pulsing with potential conflict, and sarcasm creeps in as you think how this vast realm division feels less like wise governance and more like bad estate planning. Worse than those reality TV shows where heirs squabble over grandma's china set while the house falls apart. You zoom out poetically, the chamber expanding like a fragile bubble within the sprawling palace complex, snowflakes swirling outside like scattered loyalties, the Rhine's frozen surface cracking under unseen pressures much like the Empire itself. A lyrical shift where personal quarrels dissolve into the grand currents of history, flowing toward inevitable fragmentation. Your sensory struggle deepens as the cold draft whistles through a loose shutter, carrying the faint, acrid whiff of distant Viking raid smoke from sacked monasteries drifting even here, and it mingles with the wax, creating a cloying veil that irritates your eyes to tears. The numbness in your fingers spreading to your wrists like creeping frostbite, a constant ache that mirrors the injustice of peasants far away, their lives upended by these royal redrawings while you, a lowly scribe, bear witness in silent discomfort. A clever commentary surfaces it's ironic how Charlemagne's sons, raised in the glow of his conquests, now dim that light with their bickering, turning the hammer of unity into shards of rivalry, much like corporate heirs dismantling a founder's empire through boardroom battles that leave employees in the lurch. You feel a profound empathy for the absent widows and orphans of fallen brothers, their claims ignored in this male-dominated carving, sad in their voiceless plight amid the shouts, as Lothair grabs a quill to mark his larger share, his eyes gleaming with greed that chills the room deeper than any draft. The maps crinkle under pressing palms, the iron taste intensifying with the bite of quill nibs scratching like claws, now laced with the salty edge of unshed tears from the heated exchange. Sarcasm lingering as you realize peace treaties are just wars paused on paper, fragile as the wax seals that will soon melt under future flames. Zooming out once more, the scene widens to encompass the snowbound palace like an isolated fortress in a sea of white. Rivers frozen into borders that mock the drawn lines inside. A poetic tapestry where familial strife weaves patterns of destiny that will birth France from the fragments. Your numb fingers fumble the parchment, the ache climbing higher, and you wonder if this cold draft of division will ever warm into stability or freeze the realm into eternal discord. A psychological chill settles as the candles gutter low, their flames wavering like uncertain futures, casting the brothers' faces in half-light where trust once shone. You taste salt and fear mingling on your tongue like a bitter potion, forced down in the fog-shrouded coasts of the Seine estuary, where Viking longships slice through the mist like spectral predators emerging from nightmares, their dragon-headed prows leering with carved menace that sends a primal shudder through your core. Did you know that by the 840s, these Norse raiders had sacked Paris itself, demanding a ransom of £7,000 of silver, a staggering sum that bankrupted monasteries and left rivers choked with the debris of plundered lives? But historians still debate whether these invasions were pure piracy or calculated migrations driven by overpopulation back home, like refugees turning to crime in a harsh economy. The sea spray lashes your face, cold and stinging like needles of accusation, soaking into your cracked lips and blending with the recurring iron on your teeth, mutated now from the waxy tang of divisive maps into a briny, corroded bite like rust flaking from abandoned anchors, sharp amid the fishy reek of low tide where seaweed rots in slimy heaps along the shore. Your wet wool garments, evolved from the wax-spattered shroud of palace intrigues into salt-crusted rags heavy with seawater, cling to your skin like a second, suffocating layer, chafing against wind-burned flesh that weeps raw and inflamed, the fabric's sodden weight straining your shoulders and back in a constant ache that mirrors the injustice of homes raided while you stand watch. Muscles taut and protesting from hours gripping a makeshift spear fashioned from a fishing pole tipped with scavenged iron. A physical event crashes in as a Viking horn blares through the fog, low and ominous like a beast's growl, and the longships beach with a grinding thud, warriors leaping ashore in fur-trimmed cloaks that drip with brine, their axes glinting dully as they charge toward your village's thatched huts, flames already licking at roofs from torches hurled like accusations, the crackle and roar swallowing screams of fleeing families as you rush forward, spear thrusting wildly into the melee where a raider's shield slams into your chest, knocking the wind from your lungs in a shocking burst of pain that leaves you gasping on the muddy strand. Historians argue if these seaborne raids accelerated the feudal system's rise or merely exposed its weaknesses, like stress testing a faulty app that crashes under load. But as you scramble to your feet, lungs burning from the acrid smoke billowing from burning granaries, you feel the profound sadness of villagers clutching children and fleeing inland, their lives upended by strangers who see treasure in what you call home. A lightly dramatized despair where empathy wells for the Norsemen too exiles from frozen fjords, driven by hunger as much as greed, sad in the cycle of violence that turns survivors into perpetrators. An absurd tidbit whispers amid the chaos, did you know Vikings sometimes used walrus ivory combs, not just for grooming but as trade tokens, a bizarre luxury item that doubled as currency in raids, much like collecting limited edition sneakers today to flip for profit. The torchlight mutates here into the erratic blaze of flaming huts, flames leaping like furious spirits across the fog, casting grotesque shadows that elongate the raiders' forms into demonic giants. And sarcasm creeps in as you parry a blow, thinking how this defending feels less heroic and more like playing whack-a-mole with armed burglars, worse than dealing with porch pirates in the suburbs who steal packages while you're at work. You zoom out poetically, the coast expanding like a vast, heaving canvas smeared with greys and oranges, rivers swelling with the tide like veins pulsing with invaded blood. The distant horizon, a blurred line where sea meets sky in indifferent union, a lyrical reminder where human skirmishes fade against the eternal rhythm of waves crashing endlessly. Your sensory struggle deepens as salt spray mixes with blood from a shallow gash on your arm. the sting evolving the wet wool's discomfort into a salty crust that cracks and pulls with every swing. The chill wind whipping fog that clings to your lashes like tears unshed. A constant itch against the backdrop of plundered homes where livestock bleats in panic and pottery shatters under boot heels. A clever commentary surfaces. It's ironic how Charlemagne's divided empire, revisited with a surprising twist as the conqueror of forests now leaves coasts vulnerable to these sea wolves. His iron will splintered into petty kingdoms where no single hammer can strike back effectively, much like fragmented companies losing market share to agile startups that raid and run. You feel a shocking pang of empathy for the abbots barricading monastery doors, their relics hidden in haste as axes thud against wood, sad in their futile prayers amid the roar, as a raider grabs a fleeing child only to release them at a comrade's shout, perhaps a flicker of mercy in the madness. The raids surge on, your muscles straining to the breaking point, spear arm quivering from repeated thrusts, and you taste the iron sharper, now infused with the salty edge of sweat and sea. Sarcasm lingering as you realize protection here is as reliable as a weather app predicting sun during a hurricane. Zooming out once more, the scene widens to encompass the fog-shrouded bay like a misty veil over a wounded land. Longships bobbing like predatory fish in the shallows. A poetic tapestry where the clash of cultures weaves threads of resilience from the fabric of despair. Your lungs rasp from the smoke, the salt crust cracking on your skin, and you wonder if this coastal nightmare will forge stronger defenses or merely scatter the fragments further. A psychological chill descends as the fog thickens, swallowing the raiders' retreat, their laughter echoing like ghosts mocking your strained vigil. You navigate the slippery cobblestones of misty Paris streets under a perpetual drizzle that turns the world into a blurred watercolor of grey stone and shadowed doorways, your boots sliding precariously on the uneven stones slick with rain and refuse. Each step a precarious dance that jars your ankles and sends shooting pains up your calves like warnings from the city itself to tread carefully amid the rising tides of Capetian intrigue. Did you know that in 987 Hugh Capet was elected king not by divine thunder or battlefield glory, but by a handful of scheming nobles in a backroom vote that barely mustered enthusiasm, a coronation so humble it drew fewer crowds than a local fair? Yet historians still debate whether this unassuming duke's ascent marked the true birth of France, or just a lucky break in the lottery of fractured inheritances, like winning a startup pitch with a napkin sketch, while giants like the Vikings loomed. The damp chill seeps through your threadbare cloak, wrapping around your bones like invisible fingers squeezing tighter with every gust, and you feel the wet wool mutated now from the salt-crusted rags of coastal raids into a sodden veil heavy with urban grime and river fog clinging to your skin in clammy folds that chafe against collarbones and wrists, the fabric's chill evolving into a deep-seated ache that makes your joints creak like old hinges protesting the weight of secrets carried through these narrow alleys. Your breath fogs the air, mingling with the musty scent of mildew rising from the Seine's banks nearby, where barges creak under loads of timber and wine, and you taste the iron on your teeth, transformed from the briny corrosion of sea raids into a foggy, metallic haze like breathing in the rust of hidden daggers drawn in dimly lit taverns, sharp amid the earthy rot of overflowing gutters that splash muck onto your hems with every passerby. A physical event unfolds as you duck into a dimly lit inn off the Ile de la Cité, the door groaning open to reveal a cluster of nobles huddled around a scarred table, their whispers halting as Hugh Capet himself, unassuming in his plain tunic, eyes sharp as a falcon's, gestures you closer, his voice low and urgent as he outlines an alliance with the Archbishop of Reims. Parchments, unfurling like serpents to map out bribes and oaths that will secure his throne against rival dukes, the candle flames leaping as a fist pounds the wood in agreement, sealing pacts in wax that drips hot and sealing like blood oaths. Historians argue if Hugh's humble domains around Paris were a strategic gold mine due to their central rivers and roads, or merely a lucky geographic fluke that turned a minor lord into a dynasty founder, like stumbling upon prime real estate in a booming market while others squabble over wastelands. But as you lean in, feeling the damp chill intensify from a draught slipping under the door, your fingers numb on the tankard of watered ale that tastes of stale barley and intrigue. You sense the shocking sadness of lesser folk outside, their hovels leaking in the rain, while these men forge empires over dice and deals, a lightly dramatized web where empathy stirs for the forgotten wives bartering scraps in the markets. Their hands chapped from endless labor amid the rising whispers of royal games they can't play. An absurd tidbit flickers in the candlelight. Did you know early Capetian kings sometimes used hollowed-out gourds as portable thrones during travels? A bizarre makeshift seat that symbolized their nomadic power grabs, much like CEOs today lugging folding chairs to pop-up meetings and garages. The torchlight here mutated into the steady glow of tallow candles, sputtering in iron sconces casts elongated shadows that twist across the walls like conspiring ghosts, illuminating faces etched with calculation, and sarcasm creeps in as you sip the ale, thinking how these alliances forged in secret feel less like masterful strategy and more like shady group chats plotting a surprise party that might end in backstabs. Worse than office politics where one email CC can unravel careers, you zoom out poetically, the inn expanding like a dimly lit stage in the vast theatre of Paris, streets winding like veins pulsing with hidden currents, the Seine flowing eternally as a silver thread, stitching together fragments of old empires. A lyrical reminder where personal pacts ripple into national destinies like stones skipped across water. Your sensory struggle deepens as the damp chill worms its way under your collar, evolving the wet wool's discomfort into a shivering embrace that rattles your teeth. The fog outside pressing against grimy windows like eavesdroppers, a constant prickle against the backdrop of nobles' murmurs, where deals are struck with handshakes that bind like chains, the injustice of it all weighing heavier as you realize peasants like you fund these intrigues with taxes squeezed from meager harvests. A clever commentary surfaces. It's ironic how Hugh Capet, revisiting Charlemagne with a surprising twist, the great emperor's fractured legacy, now a cautionary tale for this duke who builds slowly from ruins. Turning divisions draft into a steady breeze filling his sails rises not through hammers or raids but quiet nods in misty taverns, much like indie filmmakers bootstrapping hits while blockbusters flop from overreach. You feel a profound empathy for the archbishop, his robes damp from the walk here, eyes weary from balancing faith and favour, sad in his compromised vows amid the clink of coins changing hands under the table. The meeting adjourns with hushed farewells, your muscles stiff from standing sentinel, and you taste the iron sharper, now laced with the waxy residue of sealed letters passed in the gloom, sarcasm lingering as you step back into the streets, realizing power here is as slippery as the cobblestones themselves, prone to trips and falls. Zoom out once more. The scene widens to encompass the misty city like a shrouded jewel in the night, alleys branching like veins of secrecy, the cathedral's spire piercing the fog as a silent witness to rising dynasties, a poetic tapestry where the clash of ambitions weaves subtle patterns that will outlast the rain. Your joints protest the return to the cold, the damp chill deepening into a bone-deep shiver, and you wonder if these secret alliances will solidify a kingdom or dissolve like mist at dawn. A strange visual image persists, the wax seal on a parchment cooling in the air, its imprint of a humble crown hardening like a promise, etched in fragile amber, glinting faintly before the candle snuffs out. You wince at the sting of Eleanor's scornful gaze piercing through the opulent tapestries of the Poitiers court in 1152, her eyes like daggers forged in the fires of unyielding Aquitaine pride, cutting sharper than any blade as she declares the annulment to a stunned Louis VII, the air thick with the musty scent of courtly deceptions unravelling like frayed threads from a once grand weave. Did you know that this royal divorce, ostensibly over consanguinity, actually stemmed from Eleanor's frustration with Louis's pious ineptitude, a split that historians estimate cost France half its territory in one fell swoop? But they still debate whether it was her bold feminism clashing with medieval patriarchy or just a power play that redrew Europe's map like a scorned lover slashing a portrait. The chamber's heavy velvet curtains trap the humidity from a recent storm, turning the space into a stifling cocoon where sweat beads on your forehead and trickles down your neck in itchy rivulets, mingling with the recurring taste of iron on your teeth, mutated now from the foggy metallic haze of Paris alleys into a velvety, perfumed bite like sipping wine laced with hidden poisons, sharp amid the cloying aroma of rosewater and intrigue that clings to the noble silks. Your wet wool undergarments, evolved from the grime-soaked veils of misty streets, into sweat-dampened layers beneath finer linens borrowed for this audience. Chafe against your inner thighs and armpits in a persistent, burning friction that makes every shift in your stance a small torture. The fabric's dampness pulling taut like the tension in the room, where alliances fray and snap under the weight of personal vendettas, the injustice of it all pressing on your chest like an unseen hand, reminding you how women's fates in these shadowy betrothals are bartered like livestock at market, their voices drowned in the din of male egos. A physical event erupts as Eleanor sweeps across the marble floor, her gown whispering threats against the stone, confronting Louis with accusations of weakness that echo off the vaulted ceilings like thunderclaps in a summer squall. Courtiers gasping as she demands freedom, her words slicing through the pretense of holy matrimony and exposing the raw nerves of a kingdom teetering on marital mishaps. The king's face paling as scribes scramble to draft the dissolution papers that will hand her vast duchy to whoever claims her next Henry Plantagenet. Waiting in the wings with Angevin ambition gleaming in his eyes, historians still argue whether Eleanor's remarriage mere weeks later was a calculated revenge or genuine passion, ignited in the ashes of a failed union, like swiping right on a rebound app only to match with your ex's rival. But as you stand, frozen in the assembly, feeling the musty scent intensify from spilled incense pots knocked over in the commotion, your skin prickling with the chill of impending fallout despite the room's stuffy heat, you sense the shocking sadness of Louis's courtiers, their loyalties fracturing like the marriage itself, a lightly dramatized unraveling where empathy swells for the queen's ladies-in-waiting, whispering behind fans of their mistress's bold escape from a loveless cage, sad in the quiet despair of women navigating power through beds and births rather than battlefields. An absurd tidbit flickers amid the drama. Did you know medieval betrothals sometimes involved bedding ceremonies, where witnesses ensured consummation, a bizarre public spectacle that turned private intimacies into court theatre, much like reality TV cameras invading honeymoons for ratings? The torchlight mutated here into the golden flicker of beeswax chandeliers, dripping wax like slow tears onto the floor, casts wavering shadows that elongate Eleanor's form into a towering spectre of defiance, illuminating faces twisted in shock and calculation, and sarcasm creeps in as you clutch a goblet to steady your nerves, thinking how these shadowy betrothals gone awry play out like bad blind dates arranged by meddling aunts, worse than swiping left on a profile that screams red flags but ending up matched anyway through family pressure. You zoom out poetically, the court chamber expanding like a gilded cage within the sprawling duchy of Aquitaine, vineyards stretching beyond like veins of wine-rich blood feeding the land's rebellious heart, the distant Pyrenees looming as silent guardians to passions that reshape realms, a lyrical shift where individual heartbreaks dissolve into the grand currents of dynastic rivers flowing toward inevitable mergers and schisms. Your sensory struggle deepens as the musty scent evolves into a heady mix of sweat and spilled perfume, the wet wool's discomfort turning into a sticky adhesion that pulls hairs and irritates pores with every anxious fidget, a constant itch against the backdrop of nobles murmuring alliances anew, the injustice weighing heavier as you realize this split will birth the Angevin Empire, swallowing French lands in English jaws while you, a mere observer, bear the chill of uncertainty in your bones. A clever commentary surfaces. It's ironic how Louis VII, revisiting Hugh Capet with a surprising twist, the humble duke's patient alliances, now mocked by this king's hasty piety that loses half the kingdom to a woman's whim, turning Capetian caution into a lesson unlearned, fumbles the throne's greatest asset, much like CEOs fumbling mergers by ignoring the human element, leaving shareholders you included scrambling in the fallout. You feel a profound empathy for Eleanor's children, caught in the crossfire of parental wars, their futures bartered like pawns on a chessboard of scorn, sad in their wide-eyed confusion amid the adults' unravelling deceptions. The confrontation peaks as Eleanor turns on her heel, her gaze lingering like a final sting, and you taste the iron sharper, now infused with the floral bitterness of crushed petals underfoot from a toppled vase. Sarcasm lingering as you realize courtly love is just warfare in silk gloves. Prone to unraveling at the first pull, zoom out once more. The scene widens to encompass the misty Aquitaine like a verdant tapestry fraying at the edges, rivers winding secrets toward the sea where new horizons beckon with treacherous promises, a poetic weave where the clash of hearts echoes louder than swords, birthing empires from broken vows. Your skin crawls with the sticky dampness, the ache in your limbs deepening into a weary throb, and you wonder if this scornful gaze will forge stronger chains or shatter them forever. A psychological chill descends as the chamber empties, echoes of her footsteps fading like ghosts of what might have been, leaving you in the musty silence staring at the empty throne. You grip your soaked banner tighter as the relentless rain hammers down on the besieged walls of Chateau Gaillard in 1203, the fabric heavy and sodden like a drowned flag of forgotten loyalties, its colours bleeding into grey smears that slap against your face with every gust, stinging your cheeks raw and sending rivulets of icy water trickling down your neck. Did you know that Philip Augustus's 6-month siege here cost over 100,000 livres? A fortune that could have fed half of Paris for a year. But historians still debate whether this grueling assault was a masterstroke of attrition warfare, or a vengeful obsession fueled by the ghosts of lost Aquitaine, like grinding through a marathon revenge plot where every drop of rain feels like personal payback. The downpour turns the Norman earth into a quagmire of sucking mud that pulls at your boots with greedy insistence, each step a wrenching effort that jars your joints into aching protests, the cold seeping deep into your bones like an uninvited intruder whispering of rheumatism to come, and you feel the wet wool of your surcoat mutated now from the perfumed layers of courtly unravellings into a rain-logged shroud plastered against your chest, heavy as chainmail but offering no protection, chafing your underarms and thighs in raw, burning stripes that make every movement a symphony of discomfort, the fabric's sodden weight dragging you down amid the ceaseless patter that drowns out distant cries. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, fogging the air thick with the earthy reek of churned soil and distant latrine pits overflowing in the deluge. And you taste the iron on your teeth, evolved from the velvety bite of scornful gazes into a muddy, gritty tang like swallowing silt from the Seine swollen with vengeance, sharp amid the petrichor that rises like a vengeful spirit from the besieged ground, where English defenders huddle behind Richard the Lionheart's impregnable fortress, its towers looming defiant through the sheets of rain like skeletal fingers clawing at the storm clouds. A physical event thunders as Philip's siege engines creak and groan under the torrent, catapults hurling massive stones that arc through the grey veil and crash against the battlements with bone-shaking impacts, shards of rock exploding outward like shrapnel that peppers the mud around you, forcing you to dive behind a sodden barricade where a comrade's scream cuts short as a counter-arrow finds its mark, his body slumping into the mire with a sickening splash that sprays filth across your face, a lightly dramatized horror where empathy surges for the Norman garrison starving inside, their rations dwindled to rats and boot leather while you, a foot soldier in Philip's relentless machine, press on through the deluge, sad in the shocking waste of lives poured out like the rain itself over a grudge born from Eleanor's long-ago scorn. Historians argue if Philip's sieges were innovative engineering triumphs or brutal slogs that broke spirits more than walls, like coding a revolutionary app only to debug it through endless all-nighters. But as you haul ropes taut for another trebuchet launch, your joints aching from the muddy toll that twists your knees into knots of fire, the relentless rain evolving the wet wool's discomfort into a full-body shiver that rattles your teeth, you sense the profound injustice of it all. Peasants like you conscripted to reclaim lands lost in royal bedrooms while dukes feast dry and warm miles away. An absurd tidbit sloshes through your mind amid the downpour. Did you know medieval besiegers sometimes used vinegar-soaked sponges as primitive gas masks against smoke defences? A bizarre hack that often left them reeking like pickled fish in the rain, much like jury-rigging a face mask from household items during a modern pandemic. The torchlight mutated here into the dim, rain-hazed glow of pitch-soaked braziers sputtering under makeshift awnings casts erratic flickers across the siege lines, illuminating faces gaunt with fatigue and resolve, shadows dancing like vengeful wraiths over the mud-churned field, and sarcasm creeps in as you wipe rain from your eyes, thinking how this storming feels less like epic conquest and more like camping in a monsoon with faulty gear, worse than binge-watching a series during a blackout where the plot drags but you can't quit. You zoom out poetically, the stronghold expanding like a defiant island in a sea of liquid earth, rivers of runoff carving trenches like veins of spite through the encampment, the distant horizon blurred by sheets of grey, where England and France bleed into one stormy morass. A lyrical reminder where human vendettas seem petty against nature's impartial fury. Your sensory struggle intensifies as mud cakes your hands into clumsy mitts, the gritty slime working under nails and into cuts that sting with infection's promise. The rain's ceaseless drum evolving into a hypnotic roar that drowns thought, a constant throb against the backdrop of catapults groaning like ancient beasts awakened for vengeance. The injustice weighing heavier as you recall Eleanor's scornful gaze from the previous courtly clash, revisited with a surprising twist as the queen who unravelled one marriage now fuels this siege through her legacy to Henry, her Aquitaine fire burning brighter in Philip's retaliatory storms. A clever commentary surfaces. It's ironic how Philip, turning the tables on Angevin overreach, sieges with patient rain-soaked persistence, much like algorithm updates slowly eroding a social media giant's dominance. Leaving users you included splashing through the fallout, you feel a profound empathy for the defenders peering from arrow slits, their bows slack from damp strings, sad in their trapped defiance as hunger gnaws deeper than the rain's chill. As another stone hurtles forth, cracking the outer bailey with a resounding boom that vibrates through your aching joints. The assault presses on, your banner drooping like a wilted standard of grudge, and you taste the iron sharper, now infused with the muddy silt of vengeance swallowed in gasps. Sarcasm lingering as you realize reclaiming strongholds is as slippery as the paths leading here, prone to slides and setbacks. Zoom out once more, the scene widens to encompass the rain-lashed Norman landscape like a watercolour smeared by tears, towers standing sentinel amid flooding fields. A poetic weave where the clash of sieges threads enduring rivalries into the fabric of nations. Your limbs protest the endless haul, the ache burrowing deeper into a weary fog, and you wonder if this muddy toll will yield lasting victory or merely sow seeds for more relentless storms. A strange visual image persists the banner in your grip, its threads unravelling in the downpour, colours bleeding into the mud like forgotten oaths dissolving before the walls finally crack. You cough on the swirling desert dust that invades your lungs, like an insidious thief stealing breath in the blinding heat of the Egyptian sands during Louis IX's Seventh Crusade in 1249. The fine particles gritty and abrasive against your throat, scraping raw like swallowing handfuls of shattered glass mixed with the relentless sun's fury. Did you know that this ill-fated expedition saw over 50,000 French troops march into the Nile Delta, only to be decimated by disease and ambush? A catastrophe that historians still argue was a pious king's noble failure, driven by genuine faith or a reckless vanity project that drained France's coffers drier than the parched dunes themselves. Much like funding a moonshot tech venture with borrowed billions only to crash on launch. The air shimmers with oppressive waves of heat rising from the golden expanse, carrying the acrid tang of camel dung and unwashed bodies packed too close in the marching column, and you feel the sweat pouring down your back in endless streams, soaking your chainmail hauberk beneath the surcoat until it weighs like a leaden curse. The metal links chafing against your skin in burning friction that evolves the familiar wet wool motif mutated now from the rain-soaked sieges of Normandy into a sweat-drenched linen shift plastered to your torso, heavy as guilt and clinging like accusations from the home you left behind. The fabric's sodden burden pulling at your shoulders with every laboured step across the shifting sands that suck at your boots like hungry mouths eager to swallow you whole. Your mouth fills with the iron taste on your teeth, transformed from the muddy grit of vengeful assaults into a parched, dusty bite like licking rusted armour baked under the merciless sun, sharp and unrelenting amid the choking haze that blurs your vision to tears. Each blink a struggle against the fine grains that embed in your lashes like tiny demons mocking your holy quest. A physical event surges as the column halts abruptly at the banks of the Nile branch near Mansoura. Louis himself, St. Louis to posterity. But here a determined king in gleaming plate despite the heat dismounts to rally the troops with fervent prayers, his voice cutting through the din of creaking wagons and neighing horses. But suddenly Saracen scouts appear on the horizon, like mirages made flesh, arrows whistling through the air in a deadly hail that thuds into shields and flesh alike, forcing you to dive behind a sand dune where a fellow crusader gasps his last. blood bubbling from his lips in a shocking gurgle that stains the golden grains crimson, a lightly dramatized horror where empathy overwhelms you for this stranger from Provence. His eyes wide with the sad realization that paradise promised in sermons feels farther than the stars above this infernal plain. Historians debate if Louis's crusades were chivalric pinnacles of medieval devotion, or futile drains on resources that weakened France for generations, like pouring venture capital into a bottomless pit of idealism, while competitors back home consolidate power. But as you scramble to your feet, lungs burning from the dust that evolves into a choking veil thicker than fog, your joints aching from the endless march that twists your knees into knots of fire under the sun's hammer, you sense the profound injustice of it all. Peasants and knights alike conscripted for a king's divine vision, while their fields lie fallow and families starve. The Holy War's irony biting deeper than any scorpion in these sands. An absurd tidbit rasps through your dust-caked thoughts. Did you know crusaders sometimes used ostrich eggs as canteens, hollowed out and sealed with wax to hold water in the heat? A bizarre ingenuity that often cracked under pressure, leaving men thirstier than before. Much like relying on trendy hydration hacks during a marathon only to end up dehydrated anyway. The torchlight motif mutates here into the blinding glare of the midday sun reflecting off polished shields, casting erratic flashes that dance across the dunes like false beacons of hope, illuminating faces gaunt with heatstroke and resolve, shadows shortening to stubs under the zenith's tyranny. And sarcasm creeps in as you shield your eyes, thinking how this marching to distant sands feels less like sacred pilgrimage and more like a disastrous group hike organized by an overconfident tour guide, worse than signing up for a wellness retreat that turns into a survival boot camp with no refunds. You zoom out poetically, the delta expanding like a vast, shimmering mirage where the Nile's branches snake through the golden wastes like lifelines etched in a palm reader's hand, distant pyramids looming as ancient witnesses to fleeting human follies, a lyrical reminder where rivers of faith meet seas of doubt in eternal confluence. Your sensory struggle intensifies as the blinding heat bakes your skin into leathery tightness, sweat evaporating too quickly to cool, leaving salt crystals that sting like tiny needles in every crease, the dust storm whipping up to claw at your nostrils and eyes in a whirlwind of abrasion, a constant throb against the backdrop of the king's banners, fluttering defiantly yet fraying at the edges, the injustice weighing heavier as you witness camp followers, women and children pushed to the expedition's fringes huddling under scant tents, their faces etched with the quiet despair of being collateral in a man's holy dream. A clever commentary surfaces amid the haze. It's ironic how Louis IX, revisiting Philip Augustus with a surprising twist, the siege master's vengeful reigns now echoed in this saintly king's desert droughts. Turning European triumphs into Eastern tragedies pursues glory through piety. Much like social media influencers chasing enlightenment retreats, only to post filtered selfies while ignoring the real grit, leaving followers, you among them, parched for authenticity. You feel a profound empathy for the Egyptian locals fleeing their villages ahead of the advance, their mud brick homes abandoned to the invaders' torches, sad in their uprooted lives caught between warring gods they never chose, as another volley of arrows forces you to crouch low, heart pounding against ribs that feel brittle in the heat. The crusade presses onward, wagons bogging down in sand drifts that swallow wheels like quicksand traps, and you taste the iron sharper, now infused with the alkaline bite of desert salts crusting your lips. Sarcasm lingering as you realize holy quests turned to dust are as predictable as diets failing in the face of temptation, prone to collapse under their own weight. As the sun dips toward afternoon, casting longer shadows that offer fleeting respite, you haul a supply cart free from a rut, muscles screaming in protest, the ache burrowing deeper into a feverish fog that blurs the line between exhaustion and delirium, wondering if this blinding pursuit will illuminate salvation or merely scatter ashes across forgotten sands. But the march continues, Louis's voice rallying from ahead like a beacon in the dust, his piety a shield against the irony of it all, where quests for Jerusalem lead only to mirages of victory that shimmer and vanish. You wipe dust from your brow, only to smear it into streaks like war paint from a lost tribe, the heat evolving into a pulsating throb that syncs with your heartbeat, pulsing through veins like molten lead, and empathy swells again for the nights collapsing from sunstroke, their armor trapping body heat like ovens, their gasps a chorus of regret in this oven of ambition. Sarcasm whispers through the wind who knew crossing seas for God would feel like auditioning for a survival show where the prize is eternal life, but the entry fee is your mortal coil. The delta's insects swarm in the waning light, biting at exposed skin in pinpricks that add to the symphony of discomfort. The Nile's waters tantalizingly close yet fouled by the army's passage, turning refreshment into risk of dysentery that twists guts like knotted ropes. You zoom out poetically once more, the crusade column snaking across the sands like a weary serpent shedding its skin. Pyramids fading into haze as eternal sentinels to transient crusades, rivers branching like choices untaken in the labyrinth of faith, a lyrical weave where human zeal meets nature's indifference in harmonious discord. As night approaches, campfires flicker like distant stars fallen to earth, their smoke adding to the dust's veil, mutating the sun's glare into nocturnal glows that promise rest, but deliver only fitful sleep on hard ground, the iron taste lingering like a prophecy of blood to come. You huddle by one such fire, flames crackling with the pop of dry reeds, warming fingers numb from the day's grip on reins and weapons, but the chill of doubt creeps in regardless, sad in the realization that holy wars wage as much within hearts as without, leaving scars invisible yet profound. The king's tent glows in the distance, a hub of strategy where maps are pored over by candlelight. Lewis's faith a lighthouse in the storm, but you wonder, sarcasm edging your thoughts. If even saints question their paths when dust turns to mud under unexpected rains, or if perseverance is just stubbornness dressed in prayer, the stars wheel overhead, indifferent to the ants below marching toward Mansoura, where fate awaits with open jaws, and you cough again, the dust settling deeper, evolving into a persistent hack that rattles your frame. The ache in your limbs a dull roar that promises no ease. Empathy for fallen comrades lost to fever earlier in the week tugs at you. Their shallow graves marked by crude crosses in the sand, blown over by winds that care not for crosses or crescents. A modern aside flickers like the fire that is like joining a viral challenge for glory, only to realize halfway the trends turn toxic, leaving you trending for all the wrong reasons. As the night deepens, whispers of desertion ripple through the ranks, men grappling with the bitter irony of quests meant for salvation that deliver only suffering. Their voices low like the Nile's murmur, carrying tales of home where wives wait with empty hearths. You lie back on your bedroll, the ground hard as unyielding faith, staring at constellations that mock your earthly strivings, the heat of day giving way to nocturnal shivers that mutate the sweat into clammy chills, wrapping you in a cocoon of discomfort where sleep evades like an elusive victory. The crusade's rhythm beats on, drums in the distance signaling watch changes, and you taste the iron anew, bitter with the dust of doubt, wondering if dawn will bring triumph or merely more miles of mirage. But the stars fade as exhaustion claims you, dreams haunted by sands that shift and swallow, a psychological chill lingering in the pre-dawn hours where holy purpose feels as distant as Jerusalem itself. You wake to the bugle's call, the dust already stirring with the first light, ready to cough and march once more into the blinding unknown. You feel the icy grip of Philip's ambition closing around your throat like invisible fingers forged from frozen gold in the echoing halls of the Palais de la Cité in 1303. The chill seeping through your veins as if the king's gaze itself could freeze blood mid-flow. Did you know that Philip the Fair's arrest of Pope Boniface at Anagni shocked Christendom to its core, involving a slap to the Holy Father's face that echoed through history? A scandal historians still debate as either a bold assertion of secular power or the blasphemous nadir of royal hubris, costing the French crown its moral high ground while saving its empty treasuries from bankruptcy. Much like a CEO raiding the company pension fund to fund a lavish merger that ultimately tanks the stock. The air in the vast chamber hangs heavy with the musty scent of aged tapestries and smouldering incense from hastily lit censers, the smoke curling lazily upward like serpents of doubt ascending to the vaulted ceilings, and you cough lightly on the acrid haze that irritates your eyes to watering, blending with the recurring taste of iron on your teeth mutated now from the dusty bite of crusading sands into a cold, metallic chill, like biting down on a coin minted from betrayal. sharp amid the cloying aroma of beeswax candles guttering in iron sconces that cast long, wavering shadows across the stone floors polished to a slippery sheen by countless plotting footsteps. Your wet wool robes, evolved from the sweat-drenched linens of desert marches into heavy velvet-trimmed garments, damp from the autumn fog rolling off the Seine outside, cling to your limbs in clammy folds that chafe against your inner elbows and knees with every nervous shift. The fabric's sodden weight pulling at your posture, like the invisible chains of loyalty binding you to this court, where whispers of financial desperation echo off the walls. The chill draft whistling through arrow-slit windows that offer glimpses of Paris's misty spires, making your joints ache with a deep-seated throb, as if the king's insatiable hunger for coin has seeped into your very bones. Protesting the injustice of a realm bled dry to fund endless wars and papal confrontations, a physical event unfolds as Philip himself strides into the hall, his tall frame cloaked in royal blue that shimmers faintly in the candlelight, slamming a fist onto the oaken table, where maps of Templar holdings sprawl like dissected carcasses, his voice booming with calculated fury as he accuses Boniface of heresy and simony. Courtiers murmuring assent while scribes scribble indictments that will justify the unthinkable seizing the Pope's envoys and plotting the raid on Anagni where French agents, led by the ruthless Guillaume de Nogaret, burst into the papal residence like thieves in sacred night, the slap resounding through reports that reach this hall like thunderclaps delayed, a lightly dramatized outrage where empathy surges for the aging Boniface, crumpled in his chambers with a face marked by mortal insult, sad in the shocking vulnerability of a man who claimed infallibility, now reduced to trembling frailty by secular steel, his tiara toppled like the illusions of church supremacy. Historians still argue whether Philip's clash with the papacy was a principled stand for national sovereignty or a desperate cash grab veiled in theology, like a government nationalizing banks during a recession while preaching fiscal piety. But as you stand rigid among the assembled advisors, feeling the icy grip tighten in your chest with every heated word, your lungs constricting from the incense smoke that evolves into a suffocating veil, thicker than desert dust, your fingers numb on the hilt of a ceremonial dagger that feels heavier than guilt, you sense the profound weight of it all. The Templars' once crusading heroes revisited with a surprising twist, as the bankers who funded Louis's dusty failures, now targeted for their vaults brimming with gold from holy wars, turned profitable ventures doomed to fall under accusations of heresy, concocted in these very halls, their white mantles stained by whispers of sodomy and idol worship that mask the true sin of wealth too tempting for a bankrupt king. An absurd tidbit flickers in the candle glow. Did you know Templars sometimes used encrypted ledgers with Pig Latin ciphers to hide transactions? A bizarre medieval spreadsheet that baffled auditors as much as modern tax havens puzzle IRS agents today. The torchlight motif mutates here into the steady flicker of wax tapers, dripping like slow accusations onto the floor, casting erratic shadows that elongate Philip's profile into a demonic silhouette against the tapestries depicting biblical judgments, illuminating faces etched with sycophantic nods and hidden fears. And sarcasm creeps in as you shift your weight to ease the ache in your knees, thinking how this confronting papal thrones feels less like righteous reform and more like a corporate raid disguised as a holy audit, worse than those boardroom takeovers where executives smile while sharpening knives under the table. You zoom out poetically, the hall expanding like a cavernous echo chamber within the sprawling palace complex, rivers of intrigue flowing through Paris's veins like the Seine outside swollen with autumn rains, distant cathedral bells tolling faintly as indifferent timekeepers to royal blasphemies, a lyrical reminder where whispers amplify into roars that reshape faiths and fortunes alike. Your sensory struggle deepens as the musty scent evolves into a heady mix of fierce sweat from the courtiers and the metallic tang of inkwells spilling in haste, the damp velvet's discomfort turning into a sticky adhesion that pulls at hairs and irritates pores with every anxious fidget, the chill draft whistling louder now like accusatory ghosts from Anagni's violated sanctum, a constant prickle against the backdrop of Nogaret's report arriving by courier, his words dripping with triumph as he describes the Pope's humiliation, the injustice weighing heavier as you realize the Templars' fall will follow, their commanderies raided at dawn on Friday the 13th of October 1307, Knights dragged from beds in chains while their treasures gold from Outremer. Lands from grateful donors flow into royal coffers to plug holes punched by crusading debts and papal wars. A clever commentary surfaces amid the murmurs. It's ironic how Philip, turning the tables on Boniface's Unum Sanctum bull that claimed papal supremacy over kings, now asserts royal divinity through brute force, much like tech moguls challenging regulators only to impose their own monopolies, leaving the little faithful you included ringing with whispers of doubt in once sacred institutions. You feel a profound empathy for the Templar Grandmaster Jacques de Molay, arrested in his Paris preceptory with eyes wide in betrayed shock, sad in his unwavering loyalty to an order founded on crusading purity, now twisted into heresy by fiscal desperation. As Philip nods approval to the torture warrants that will extract confessions through rack and fire, the hall's echoes ringing with the financial desperation that birthed this purge, the king's treasury echoing emptier than the promises of absolution, once sold by the very church he defies. The meeting drags on, plans unfurling like venomous vines across the table, and you taste the iron sharper, now infused with the waxy bitterness of sealing wax pressed onto death warrants. Sarcasm lingering as you realize ambition's icy grip squeezes not just throats but souls, prone to frostbite in the pursuit of power that melts away like candle stubs. As scribes copy edicts by flickering light, your muscles stiff from standing sentinel, the ache climbing higher into a weary fog that blurs the line between loyalty and complicity, wondering if this papal confrontation will crown Philip supreme, or curse him with the chill of eternal infamy. But the king rises, his ambition glowing colder than the draft, dismissing the assembly with a wave that sends shivers through the room, and you file out into the foggy night where Paris's lanterns wink like wary eyes, the Seine's waters murmuring secrets of fallen knights and humbled popes, the injustice of it all settling like frost on your skin. Empathy for the Templars deepens as you imagine their dawn arrests, chains clanking in the dark like judgments from on high, their white crosses soiled by mud and lies, sad in the tragedy of warriors turned bankers, turned scapegoats for a king's empty purse. Sarcasm whispers through the mist who knew holy orders could be audited to death, like non-profits hit with IRS scrutiny for daring to thrive while governments flounder. The palace fades behind you, its halls echoing with the ring of desperation that will soon toll for Desmoulins on the pyre in 1314 his curses against Philip, and the Pope lingering like smoke from extinguished flames. A psychological chill that follows you home where sleep evades, haunted by the grip that loosens nothing but tightens everything in its wake. You lie awake, the chill evolving into a full-body shiver under thin blankets, the iron taste persistent like regret, questioning if ambition's frost will thaw into renewal or encase France in eternal winter. A strange visual image haunts your dreams, the papal tiara rolling across Anani's floor like a discarded crown of thorns, glinting in the torchlight before vanishing into shadows cast by Philip's long reach. And as dawn breaks grey and unforgiving, you rise to another day in this court of icy schemes, the whispers of financial desperation evolving into roars that echo through history's corridors. The Templars fall a cautionary blaze in the cold, where holy fires consume the faithful to fuel the profane, the injustice burning brighter than any pyre, sad in its enduring legacy of power's corrupt chill. The king's ambition, like a glacier carving valleys through resistance, leaves scars on the landscape of faith, where popes and knights alike crumble under its weight, their echoes ringing in your ears like tinnitus from a slap that resounded across continents, the debate raging on whether this was progress or profanity. But in the moment, it's just the cold draft of change blowing through cracked thrones. You walk the Seine's banks, fog mutating the morning light into ethereal veils, ships creaking with cargoes that can't fill the voids left by purged wealth, and empathy for Boniface returns, his death from shock a month after the outrage, a broken man whose bull of supremacy now paper ash in the wind. Sarcasm curls your lip, divine right meets royal might, and guess who blinks first? The palace looms in the distance, its halls waiting for more confrontations, the grip loosening only to seize anew, leaving you to ponder the price of such frozen pursuits in a world thawing toward modernity's uncertain warmth. The iron taste fades slightly with breakfast bread, but the chill lingers, a psychological frost that numbs the soul, questioning if any throne can withstand ambition's icy embrace without shattering like glass under pressure. As you return to duty, the whispers follow. Financial desperations ring, evolving into a tolling bell for eras ending and new tyrannies beginning. The Templars' ghosts walking beside you in the mist. Their chains a symphony of warning unheeded, and so the court turns, wheels within wheels grinding on, the sad, shocking element of it all a tapestry of human frailty, woven with threads of gold stolen from the faithful, leaving historians to pick at the knots while you live the unravelling, breath by breath, in the echoing halls where popes fall and kings rise on the backs of broken vows. The absurdity of it strikes anew, knights sworn to poverty, amassing fortunes that tempt kings to heresy charges. A bizarre inversion where protectors become prey, much like whistleblowers in corporations getting fired for exposing the boss's sins. You pause at a window, gazing over Paris awakening, the Seine's waters reflecting a city built on such deceptions, the zoom-out poetic in its scope, halls connecting to streets, to rivers, to seas, where clashes ripple outward like stones in ponds, lyrical in the flow of time that erodes even the mightiest ambitions to dust. The day unfolds, the grip persisting, and you carry on, the chill a companion in this dance of power's cold calculus. You shudder in the fevered isolation of a plague-ravaged village hut during the Black Death's merciless sweep in 1348, your body racked by uncontrollable tremors as buboes swell under your armpits like grotesque fruits ripening in poisoned soil. The pain, a throbbing fire that radiates outward in waves, making every breath a labored gasp through lips cracked and bleeding. Did you know that this pandemic wiped out up to 60% of Europe's population in just a few years, turning bustling towns into ghost realms overnight? But historians still debate whether it was solely the Yersinia pestis bacterium carried by fleas on rats, or exacerbated by malnutrition and climate shifts from the Little Ice Age, like a perfect storm of biology and bad luck that hit harder than any medieval siege engine ever could. The air inside the dim hovel hangs thick and foul with the stench of vomit and decay, a nauseating miasma that clings to your nostrils like tar, forcing you to inhale shallowly to avoid retching, and you cough violently, phlegm flecked with blood splattering the straw-strewn floor, blending with the recurring taste of iron on your teeth, mutated now from the cold metallic chill of papal confrontations into a sickly, coppery bile rising from your inflamed throat, sharp and unrelenting amid the putrid rot of unwashed bodies and festering sores that permeate the confined space where you've been quarantined. The door barred from outside by fearful neighbours who whisper prayers through the cracks. Your wet wool blanket, evolved from the velvet-trimmed garments of courtly schemes, into a threadbare rag soaked with your own fever sweat, and the dampness seeping through the thatched roof during endless rains, clings to your feverish skin like a parasitic shroud, heavy and suffocating, chafing against the swollen lymph nodes in raw agony that makes every twitch a fresh hell. The fabric's sodden weight pressing down on your chest like the collective grief of a continent, buckling under invisible invaders, the chill of isolation deepening into bone-deep shivers, despite the heat radiating from your body, protesting the injustice of a world where kings wage endless wars, while common folk like you endure shadowy plagues that strike without mercy or discrimination, turning families into statistics buried in mass pits outside the village walls. A physical event erupts as the door rattles suddenly from a frantic pounding, your delirious mind conjuring ghosts at first, but it's a desperate neighbour begging for entry, his voice hoarse and breaking as he describes the 100 Years' War battles raging nearby at Crécy in 1346, where English longbowmen slaughtered French knights in a hail of arrows that turned fields into pincushions, the conflict spilling refugees into your already stricken hamlet, one stumbling in before you can protest, collapsing at your feet with eyes glazed from the same fever, his laboured breath sinking with yours in a macabre duet that fills the hut with the symphony of suffering, a lightly dramatised horror where empathy overwhelms you for this stranger. Perhaps a soldier fleeing the endless wars sparked by Edward III's claim to the French throne, in 1337 his body marked by arrow scars from battles that betrayed hopes of quick victory. Sad in the shocking realization that plagues don't pause for truces, devouring warriors and peasants alike in a democracy of death that mocks the chivalric codes preached by kings safe in their distant castles. Historians still argue whether the 100 Years' War was a dynastic squabble over thrones or a catalyst for national identities emerging from the chaos. Like forging steel in a blacksmith's fire where each hammer blow, be it Agincourt in 1415 or Orleans in 1429, shapes borders and loyalties anew. But as you drag yourself closer to offer a sip of stagnant water from a cracked bowl, your lungs burning from the foul air that evolves into a choking veil thicker than siege smoke, your joints aching from the fever's relentless toll that twists your limbs into knots of fire under the blanket's oppressive weight. You sense the profound weight of it all. The Templars' fall from previous papal clashes, revisited with a surprising twist as their dissolved orders' echoes now haunt these wars. Their seized wealth funding the very armies that bleed France dry, while plagues feast on the weakened remnants. The injustice weighing heavier as you recall how Philip the Fair's financial desperation birthed this era of betrayal, leaving generations to endure ravages where hopes of glory turn to ashes in fevered graves. An absurd tidbit rusps through your delirium. Did you know medieval physicians sometimes prescribed plague poses of herbs stuffed in beak-like masks? A bizarre avian disguise meant to ward off miasma, but often just mask the stench while doing little against the real bacterial culprit. Much like wearing trendy face coverings during a viral outbreak today that offer more fashion than function. The torchlight motif mutates here into the dim flicker of a single tallow candle, sputtering on a rickety stool, its greasy smoke adding to the hut's foul veil, casting erratic shadows that elongate the dying man's form into a grotesque spectre, writhing on the floor, illuminating your own swollen features in the cracked mirror shard propped against the wall, and sarcasm creeps in as you dab his forehead with a rag, thinking how these endless wars and shadowy plagues feel less like divine tests and more like a cosmic joke where God plays dice with humanity. Worse than binge-watching a historical drama series that jumps from battle to pandemic without commercial breaks for relief. You zoom out poetically, the hut expanding like a fragile cocoon in the vast web of stricken villages dotting the French countryside, rivers swollen with unburied bodies floating downstream like accusations against warring lords, distant battlefields smoking under grey skies where English and French clash in mud-churned fields, a lyrical reminder where individual fevers merge into the fever of nations burning with betrayed ambitions. Your sensory struggle intensifies as the foul air thickens with the man's worsening gasps, the stench evolving into a putrid assault that turns your stomach in nauseous waves. The fever's heat battling the chill, seeping through the walls in a contradictory torment that leaves you shivering and sweating simultaneously. A constant throb against the backdrop of distant church bells tolling for the dead. Their peals muffled by the endless rains that drum on the roof like impatient fingers of fate. The injustice of it all pressing like a vice as you realize the 100 Years' War's betrayals. Kings like Charles Zisk descending into madness, while nobles like the Duke of Burgundy switch sides for profit mirror the plague's indiscriminate betrayal of bodies, leaving survivors scarred in soul and flesh. A clever commentary surfaces amid the haze. It's ironic how Louis XI's dusty crusades, turning holy zeal into logistical nightmares, now echo in these home-front ravages where wars abroad breed plagues at home, much like global supply chains today collapsing under pandemics sparked by distant travels, leaving economies in fevered isolation while leaders debate blame from ivory towers. You feel a profound empathy for the village healer who fled days ago, abandoning potions of leeches and vinegar soaks that offered false hope, sad in their futile scramble against an invisible foe that laughs at poultices and prayers, as the man's hand clutches yours in a final, weak grip, his eyes pleading for comfort in this shared isolation where betrayed hopes flicker dimmer than the candle's flame. The wars rage on beyond your walls, reports of English victories at Poitiers in 1356, filtering through quarantined whispers, where King John II's capture demands ransoms that bankrupt the realm further, fueling more desperation and death in a vicious cycle that spins like a wheel of misfortune. The shocking element of knights once clad in shining armour, now rotting in plague pits alongside serfs, their chivalric dreams dissolved in pus and fever. Sarcasm whispers through your delirium who knew enduring ravages meant playing host to both English arrows and Italian fleas, a double feature of horror where the ticket price is your very life, prone to plot twists that no bard could invent without accusations of exaggeration. As night falls, the candle gutters low, its smoke coiling like departing spirits, and you huddle closer to the body now still, the fever's grip loosening only to leave you in solitary shuddering. The ache in your swollen nodes a dull roar that promises continuation or release, wondering if dawn will bring survivor's guilt or merely more tolling bells. The psychological chill deepens as shadows lengthen, the hut's isolation a microcosm of France's fractured soul, where wars and plagues conspire to betray every hope sown in fertile fields now fallow and forsaken. You close your eyes, the foul air a blanket heavier than any wool, drifting into fitful visions where battlefields merge with graveyards. The iron taste persistent like regret for eras of glory turned to grit, but morning comes with weak light filtering through cracks, birdsong mocking the silence of the dead, and you rise unsteadily, the fever breaking in sweats that drench you anew, stepping out into a world where the 100 years' strife continues unabated, English longbows humming death while French knights charge into legend or oblivion, the betrayal of hopes evolving into resilient sparks that will one day ignite national fires. But for now, it's just the chill of survival in a land ravaged and raw. The village lies eerily quiet, carts of the dead rumbling past with hooded figures pushing through mud. Their masks beak like absurdities stuffed with herbs that do little against the air's foul betrayal, and empathy swells for orphans wandering the lanes, eyes hollow with loss that wars amplify through absent fathers fallen at Crécy or Poitiers, sad in their innocence shattered by adult follies. Sarcasm curls your lip as you scavenge for bread in an abandoned hovel, thinking how shadowy plagues make endless wars seem almost quaint, like arguing over board games while the house burns down around you. The sun struggles through clouds, casting pale light on fields overgrown with weeds, the zoom-out poetic in its desolation, villages dotting the landscape like pockmarks on a scarred face, rivers carrying away the detritus of battles and bodies in eternal flow, a lyrical weave where the clash of epochs threads despair into the fabric of endurance. Your steps falter on the path to the next town, the ache lingering in your limbs like echoes of the fever's ravages, the foul air following in wisps of memory, and you wonder if betrayed hopes can ever bloom anew from soil soaked in so much sorrow. A strange visual image haunts the horizon, a lone flagpole on a distant hill, its banner tattered and faded, whipping in the wind like a ghost of chivalry waving farewell to an age of illusions. You hear Joan's defiant calls slicing through the acrid smoke of Orleans' besieged walls in 1429 like a thunderclap from heaven's underbelly, her voice raw and unyielding as it rallies the ragtag French militia against English longbowmen, who've turned the Loire Valley into a killing field for months. Did you know that this illiterate peasant girl from Domrémy convinced a skeptical dauphin to arm her with just her visions and a white banner, lifting a siege that had starved the city to near collapse in mere days? But historians still argue whether her voices were divine revelations, auditory hallucinations from a traumatized mind, or a calculated morale boost engineered by royal propagandists desperate to unify a fractured kingdom, like a viral TED Talk going global and sparking a movement when all other speeches fall flat. The air assaults your lungs with the thick veil of gunpowder and charred wood from flaming barricades. The haze so dense it stings your eyes to streaming tears and coats your throat in a gritty rasp that forces hacking coughs amid the clamour of clashing pikes and desperate war cries, blending with the recurring taste of iron on your teeth, mutated now from the ashen bite of Templar pyres into a smoky, sulphurous tang like gnawing on embers from a witch's stake, sharp and unrelenting amid the earthy rot of churned battlefield mud where fallen bodies sink like discarded puppets. Your wet wool gambeson, evolved from the sweat-drenched shrouds of plague huts into a battle-soaked hauberk heavy with Loire mist and grime, clings to your torso like a possessive spectre unwilling to release, the fabric's sodden weight pulling at your shoulders in relentless tugs that chafe raw welts across your back and chest, evolving the familiar discomfort into a full-body throb that mirrors the pounding of your heart against the injustice of fading feudal chains, where serfs like you are shackled to lords who demand your blood for their quarrels, while promising freedom that's as illusory as the dawn mist swirling through the English lines. A physical event ignites as Joan, armoured in pilfered plate that gleams dully through the haze like a peasant's prayer forged in steel, urges the charge from atop her charger, her banner fluttering defiantly as French levies surge forward in a ragged tide, clashing with English stakes where arrows whistle past like vengeful hornets, one grazing your helm with a clang that rings in your ears like a death knell, forcing you to vault over a ditch churning with foul water and debris, the splash cold and shocking as you surface gasping, scrambling up the embankment amid the chaos where a comrade falls pierced through, his blood bubbling into the mire as you drag him to cover, a lightly dramatized frenzy where empathy surges for the English archers. Homesick youths pressed into foreign mud for a king's distant greed, their faces pale with fear as they knock another shaft. Sad in the shocking waste of lives ground between the mills of national pride and feudal oaths that chain them to this alien hell as surely as your own serfdom binds you. Historians debate if Joan's victory was a miraculous pivot fueled by genuine mysticism or a lucky confluence of English fatigue and French desperation. Like a startup underdog disrupting a monopoly with sheer audacity while the giants doze. But as you haul yourself over the ramparts, lungs searing from the smoke that thickens into a blinding curtain, denser than any siege fog, your joints aching from the endless clamber that twists your knees into knots of fire under the gamison's oppressive cling, you sense the profound thrill and terror of it all, the peasant's vision revisiting Louis IX with a surprising twist, as the Saint King's dusty crusades now echo in this maid's homefront blaze, his pious failures birthing a girl who turns holy fire inward to scorch invaders' sparking flames that consume doubts and forge unity from ashes. The injustice of fading chains weighing heavier as you realize serfs fighting for a dauphin who vows reform, yet clings to the old hierarchies. Their hearts pounding in rhythm with yours against the tyranny of English occupation that razes villages and starves kin in retribution for royal games. An absurd tidbit flickers through the haze like a stray spark. Did you know medieval banners sometimes incorporated horsehair tails for wind-whipped intimidation? A bizarre flourish that tangled in branches during charges, turning symbols of might into comical snags much like influencers posing with props that backfire in live streams. The torchlight motif mutates here into the erratic blaze of pitch-soaked arrows streaking the sky, flames leaping like furious phantoms across the battlefield, casting grotesque shadows that elongate charging silhouettes into demonic legions, illuminating faces twisted in defiance and despair, and sarcasm creeps in as you thrust your pike at a retreating foeman, thinking how this igniting national flames feels less like epic saga, and more like a backyard barbecue gone rogue, where the grill explodes but everyone claims victory. Worse than hyping a group project that succeeds despite the chaos because one wildcard shows up with divine hacks, you zoom out poetically. The siege lines expanding like a fractured heart mending in the vast body of war-weary France. Rivers of the Loire pulsing with renewed blood like veins awakening from stupor. Distant bastions crumbling as embers of hope spread through the valleys. A lyrical weave where individual calls echo into collective roars that shatter chains forged in darker ages. Your sensory struggle intensifies as the smoke claws deeper into your nostrils, turning breaths to wheezing hacks that blur the fray. The pounding heart evolving the wet wool's discomfort into a racing thrum that hammers against your ribs like war drums summoning dawn. The injustice of it all pressing like a forge's heat as you witness Joan directing volleys with unerring poise, her peasant roots a thorn in the feudal lord's sides who scoff until triumph humbles them, the chains fading but stubborn, their links rusting slowly against the swell of national pride that surges through the ranks like a tide turning. A clever commentary surfaces amid the clamour. It's ironic how the 100 Years' War, spawned from Eleanor's scorn in gilded courts, now sparks its reversal in a maid's peasant calls, flipping royal follies into folk triumphs, much like meme lords toppling influencers with crowdsourced wit that virals faster than scandals. You feel a profound empathy for the rooted English, their retreat a stumbling haze of broken formations, eyes hollow with defeat that mirrors your own buried doubts, sad in their longing for misty isles while stranded in this foreign muck. As Joan's banner ignites a final push that breaches the gates, igniting cheers that drown the smoke in waves of raw elation, the assault crescendos, your pike clanging against a yielding shield in sparks that light the gloom like fleeting comets, heart pounding fiercer against the injustice of chains that once bound victors and vanquished alike, the smoke lifting to reveal streets alive with fragile joy, the pounding evolving into a triumphant pulse that echoes through the liberated city. But as banners wave and horns blare, you press inward, the flames simmering to glows that warm rather than scorch, wondering if this peasant's vision will forge lasting freedom or merely temper the chains into subtler shackles. The resolution blooms with the lifting siege, Joan's silhouette against the dawn a symbol of chains crumbling, her calls etching lessons of defiance into the soul, where injustice fades under the weight of united wills, breath steadying as the roar subsides to whispers of rebirth from ruin. Yet her path winds to Rouen in 1431, where flames claim her as heretic. Defiant to the end, sad in the irony of a liberator burned while her spark endures, hearts pounding against betrayal's cage until France rises anew. You stand amid rejoicing crowds, the smoke clearing to faces alight with hope, chains rattling faintly before silence claims them. The lesson profound that visions from the lowly can shatter empire's grip. Modern aside, glowing like embers, like a lone activist's tweet sparking a global shift. Hearts thumping against systemic walls until they crack. A strange visual lingers Joan's banner, singed but soaring on the breeze, threads glowing in sunrise like veins of fire in an awakening sky, vanishing into the horizon where new dawns await, as the clamour of battle softens into the gentle sigh of evening winds along the Loire. You feel the pounding heart ease to a steady rhythm, the smoke dispersing like forgotten worries into the twilight haze where stars begin to peek through veils of cloud. Their light a soft invitation to rest amid fields that heal from war's scars, the wet wool drying in the cooling air to become a comforting wrap rather than burden, iron fading from your tongue to the faint sweetness of victory's afterglow. Shadows lengthen gracefully over the riverbanks, silent halls of ancient willows bending in whispery boughs as empty chairs of stone outcrops offer quiet seats for reflection. The environment fading into hush where torchlight dims to moonlight's tender glow, soft breathing of leaves in the breeze mirroring your own deepening inhales, the world folding gently inward with metaphors of embers cooling to ash and rivers murmuring lullabies to weary shores. The national flames simmer now to warm hearth fires, their heat a soothing presence that lulls rather than alarms, as fading torchlight blends with starshine, wet wool dissolving into dream fabric light as feathers, iron vanishing wholly into the night's embrace. And in this tender unwinding, the tale drifts to close, a faint murmur guiding you to slumber's edge, the last whisper like a breath on candle flame, sleep now. For history's echoes fade to dreams,